There's two things I don't like: change and how things are. Welcome to Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan. I am so happy you're here. This episode, I want to kind of focus on really me at the beginning wandering the wild mess and wondering if Tennessee was going to make it all make sense for me. So I'm going to go back to looking at when all of this mess began and how I even wrapped my head around all of the things that were about to come, and talk a little bit about how much I've learned over this time that sometimes we just have to trust that the right things and people will be placed and presented to us when we need them. So I'm kind of looking back at just the last few years and how this all began. And when I think about Tennessee and how that all kind of got planted in my mind, I go back to the end of June 2022 when my separation and the change of my life all happened. And I mentioned in a previous episode that really, I think the first one, why Nashville, Tennessee, was literally, it was one night drinking a little bit too much wine, and just I happened to be looking at homes in Nashville, Hendersonville area. And I looked back because I had screenshotted some of them, and it was July 22nd that I was drinking wine and looking at homes. And I mentioned that, I had probably clicked, yeah, I want to look at this house. And the next day a realtor was like, "Are you going to come see this house?" And it's like, "I'm in Utah." So I saw that it was just barely a month later, August 25th, of 2022, I was on a plane to Nashville, not knowing anybody there, not knowing anything, just going, I think that I'm supposed to be here. And the strange thing, I don't think I'd mentioned, is that I had actually, although I'd never been to Nashville, I had planned to go to Nashville in April for my birthday, April 2020. And we all know how that went. So that was going to be my first trip to Nashville. And I had actually planned to go to Nashville by myself for my birthday, which kind of sounds weird. But looking back, there were some things even then, there's a whole lot of story that's still untold here. But even then, there were some things that I remember telling my ex-husband, like, I just need this solo trip for my birthday. I think I was going to go right before my birthday. I wasn't going to be gone for my birthday, and then that trip never happened because the world shut down in 2020. So it was just interesting that I had planned to be there by myself just a few years prior. And now fast forward, I'm looking at these houses and then I'm like, I guess I'm going here. And I remember being on the plane saying, I will know when I touch down if this is where I should be. And as soon as I touched down, I absolutely knew in my soul that Tennessee is where I belonged. And I don't know if I thought, oh, this place is going to heal me. Because I don't even know if I realized all of the healing that I needed to go through at this point. I think I was just such in a chaotic headspace still that I had no real grasp on how much my life was and would be changing. But I get to Nashville and I had rented a car and I had touched down and I knew it. I knew I was meant to be there. And I went to the hotel that I had booked, and I remember that I was using like the credit from the previous hotel that like I booked in 2020 but, like, that hotel had closed down, no longer was there, so I had to, like it was a whole long process, but anyways, I ended up at this kind of, like I don't wanna call it dumpy, but would I stay there again? Probably not, hotel, and I'm not even one to be bougie, but, I mean, now that I live here, it probably wasn't my best choice, but I didn't know, and it was fine. I didn't need anything too fancy, but I remember getting to the hotel, and I was exhausted, and I didn't I just decided I'd grab something at the hotel bar, and they had someone playing live music, which, of course, I was all about, and I'm sitting there, and I'd ordered a drink, I'd ordered a snack. I was just writing notes, jotting down my feelings and thoughts, which I often do when I'm by myself. I had my laptop, but I don't think I had it open. I was just writing notes and listening to this great musician just blow me away. And as I'm sitting there, this guy comes up to me and was like, "Hey, would you mind if I buy you a drink?" And I was like and you gotta think, and this is probably, like, weird for a lot of people, but, like, so this is August, we separated the end of June. So, like, I'm not like, this being single thing is very, very new to me, and in Utah, I'm not doing anything to be out really at this point as early as August, and I so it just kind of feels weird for s to be like, I don't even know, to be approached again because I always had a wedding ring on, like, it just was different. So I remember I was like, "Oh, I already have a drink, but thank you." Like, I don't know what to say. So he was like, "Alright, fair. Would you mind if I sit down with you then?" And I was like, "Sure." I'm by myself, it's a pretty packed little, hotel lobby, what's the harm? So, me and this guy, and we'll call him Pennsylvania, because that's where he was from. So, he was from Pennsylvania, he was in town, he was in the music industry, and we were just chatting, and of course, I'm kind of an open book often. I mean, if you couldn't tell. And so, I don't I don't often don't, like, kinda hide, feelings, and so he's like, "What are you doing here? Blah, blah, blah." And at this point, like, it came up that I, was going through a separation, getting divorced, etcetera, and he had recently been divorced. So and like I say, and I've said before, I swear there's a lot in where you're at in your life and attracting similar people to your life and or the right kind of people that you need in your life are presented to you. So, I mean, it was refreshing, we kinda I ask a lot of questions. I'm just that curious kind of person, so I'm asking him questions, and he he was he was younger than me, but he got married young too, and he had kids fairly young. So they had a couple of kids, and basically, one reason or another, she wanted out of the marriage, and so it was really hard for him, but he was, coping with all of that, etcetera. So we had talked for a while, and then he was gonna go he invited me to go to some, like, show they had that night, but it was getting late and I was tired and I had a busy day. I was gonna look at houses the next day and all the things, so I passed on the invite even though we had a really good conversation. And so he ended up saying, he wasn't gonna go out either. He didn't normally do that. And so I remember we were both going back up to our hotel rooms after, and he was like, "Oh, could I come up with you?" It's like, "No." So, but he was really kind, and we went up to the elevator together. I didn't let him get off on my floor, but I did give him my phone number, and, I said, who even knows? He didn't live in Nashville, either did I, like, it was just but he was just kind of a nice person to converse with and just seemed like a good overall human. So At the time, I'm not really thinking about the purpose, and I've said this before, there's always, like, that reason, season, lifetime thing, but Mr. Pennsylvania was just there, and I didn't think much about it. So, I'll kind of keep going on my trip, but we'll come back to him because it's very interesting how things play out. But the next day, here in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm in Tennessee. It's going to heal me. I'm going to look at houses. All is going to be good. So I look at a few houses with my realtor just to kind of get the vibe of Hendersonville. And then that night, I ask her where I should go, and I go to Midtown and I go to Losers. And I think I mentioned that it's interesting, like Winners and Losers is my favorite bar in Nashville, but it was the first bar I went to. And it was such a crazy night when I talk about the people I met and how impactful they were. So I'd met Mr. Pennsylvania, which will come into more play. But I also am sitting there at Winners at the time, and there's people playing, and I'm sitting by myself drinking Coronas. And I had to go to the restroom, and so I got up from my table, but it's just me. So kind of leaving my table empty. I didn't want to necessarily leave a beer there, but I had like chips and salsa or something, so I just left them at the table. So I go to the restroom and I come back, and this girl's like sitting at my table, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, she probably didn't realize, like, that was my table." So I, like, go to it, but then I'm like, "Oh, it's fine, you can sit there." And she's like, "Oh, are you sitting here?" And I'm like, "Yeah," which I had kinda seen her in the back, so I, like, thought that she had seen that I was sitting there, but it was like, "Okay." And then but then I come to realize that she was there by herself too, and she probably just wanted someone to hang out with. So she was like, "Well, we can sit together." And I was like, "Yeah, we can." So her and I just start chatting it up. And she's from Dallas, and she's there for work, and we're just talking, and we're different, but we're like the same. It was weird. Like, and she had been with her boyfriend for a long time, and I was telling her I had just been divorced, and we literally just hit it off. We were like requesting all these songs to the guys that were playing. We were just having the best time. And we end up like her and I end up spending, so we're like, let's go to this other bar next door. We went to Dogwood, and because they were done playing. No, first we went to Losers after with the guys that were playing. So her and I have this great night, and she's like, let's just get a shot. We won't be too crazy. Let's just get one shot. And I had never had a green tea shot before at this time. So she's like, let's get green tea shots. And I was like, I mean, it kind of sounds healthy. I'll go for it. So we get these green tea shots. It ends up becoming a night. Like, we're at Losers. We're there all night. Like, we're getting pretty wild there. But then we end up going over to Dogwood. Then it gets like literally, and I'm saying this because I didn't go out like that in Salt Lake anymore. Like, I was like married. I wasn't like staying out at bars till 2 a.m. Like, this was like a first for me. And then I'm here with this girl from Dallas that that I just barely met. And we're just like having the best time. And we were like dancing. And I remember we met these guys from they were like in town from Arizona for like a bachelor party, or was it Colorado? Some like a west, close to Utah State. And they were in town for a bachelor party. And I remember them being like, "Oh my gosh, like you guys are like asking something like, how long have we been friends?" Like they thought we were like best friends. And we literally met like that day. And like multiple people, like we were like outside playing Jenga. Like people were thinking we were like the best of friends. And I'd literally known her for like 5 hours. And fast forward that I still remained friends with her, and we kept talking. And the same year, so like that later that year, what was it, in October or November, I went to Dallas for her 30th birthday party. She was having a big like joint birthday party with her mom was turning 50 and or 60, and her and her twin were turning 30, and I went to Dallas for her birthday after meeting her once in Nashville. Like, her and I just had a time. She had this, like, rental car. We went to brunch the next day after being out all night, and she had this, like, convertible rental car, and even though she was from Dallas, she wasn't, like, huge into country, but she sucked it up for me. So I remember, as cheesy as this is, the next day we go to brunch after a wild night, and I'm like, her name's Lauren. I love you, Lauren, if you're listening. But we go, she has this rental, and we drive down Broadway, because this is, like, my first time ever going to, like, being out like that after Morgan Wallen's Broadway Girls song came out. And I, like, had her blast Broadway Girls in the convertible down, like, in their convertible down Broadway on the way to brunch. Yes, I know, queen of cringe. That is my life. But it was so fun, and she was such a trooper. She's like, "I would rather listen to, like, Post Malone." But you know what? Now he's country, so she predicted it. But anyways, so this girl, like, and I'm just saying, like, this is exactly what I needed. Like, her and I were, like, walking, like, after brunch, we're like, "Should we get tattoos?" Like, I mean, we weren't good. I couldn't do that, no. But, like, I was just, this is how life was just giving me the people that I needed to meet. So after my great time with Lauren, I'm gonna do something else kinda touristy, and I decide to go to the Grand Ole Opry, of course, because who wouldn't? So I remember it was my first time at the Opry, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is so incredible." And I just went because it was, like, the timing, and I remember it was gonna be Ernest, and I had known of him, a little bit, but, like, I didn't listen to a ton of his music at the time, strangely. Like, seems wild because he's so great, but I just hadn't listened to a ton of his music at the time. And, we go, and I remember that if you've been to the Opry, like, they do the whole spiel, and it's very diverse, and there's, like, diverse in the sense that, like, it's, like, for a mixed group from old and young and all the things. So, there was some, older country artist I'd never even heard of, but he was great, and it was so funny because I'm sitting there, and I remember I was drinking Jack Daniel's because it's my first time in Tennessee, so of course that's what I have to drink. So I'd been drinking Jack, and they weirdly, because I've been to the Opry since, and they've never done this before, but I didn't know. So this is me separated at the Opry, drinking Jack, and the guy's just talking, and he's like, "I know there's a lot of love songs, and people are always about love, but this song's gonna be a little different. So is anyone here celebrating a divorce?" And the Jack in me is like, "Woo!" Like, yes, okay, well, we can just count the cringe on this, but really, so I'm just, like, getting all, like, "Yes," and then remember this, like, people behind me, like, these guys were like, "Good for you," and then other people were just like, "Oh my gosh, this girl here, like, really?" But it was just like, now I realize they don't normally say that, "Is anyone divorced?" But it was just what I needed, like, "It's alright, Heather." Like, people get divorced because, again, I was still battling a lot of those thoughts. So anyways, directly after that whole thing, it was like an intermission, and I had looked at my phone, and at the time I was, like, probably was Snapchatting that I was at the Opry, and my ex was still my friend on Snapchat at the time for whatever reason, and because this is before, remember, it didn't happen. I think if you listen to earlier episodes, you remember that when I went to the Morgan Wallen concert, that's when the Snapchat friend thing ended, but now looking back at it, this is probably when I should have just unfriended on Snap. But I'm at the Opry, and I see, and while I was gone on this trip, I had been living me and my ex's house, but we had the pup, and when I was gonna be gone, I was like, "Would you wanna be at the house, watch the dog? I'll be gone, whatever." And then, of course, he was like, "Yes." So I see that he had snapped, which he rarely ever did, and I open it, and it's him and, like, pretty much all of our friends, and kind of this girl that, like, we weren't really friends with, but it was random that she was there, which I couldn't care about that, but it was just weird, and then my pup, and they're all in the kitchen, like, holding it, snapping it, and he never snaps. That snap was for me to see, and it just bugged me. I don't even know why. It was probably because I already had Jack. So immediately after I saw that, I was like, in my kitchen with my dog, randomly, like, just intentionally, like, and my friends, but it wasn't like my friends and I think anybody that has had that situation where you're like, whether even if it's a breakup, even not a divorce, it's just like you've all been together, like this group friend thing, and then obviously, like, not that sides have to be picked, but that just makes it harder. And so it was just weird. And, like, I never wanted to take any of his friends. Like, those were, like, his people, and, we all loved each other. We were friends for a long time, but I don't know why in the moment it just made me, I think, realize that everything was gonna be different, especially if I stayed back home in Utah. So that, enticed me to get myself a Jack Double because, right, I ain't doing Jack, but drinking it. And I do that, and then I come back in, and Ernest is gonna play. So now I'm kind of annoyed with whatever, and I don't even know if it's annoyed. I'm just kinda like, I'm drinking my Jack, and then Ernest comes on. And like I said, I had known, like, the Flower Shop song, but I didn't really listen to a ton of his other stuff. Well, he played Feet Wanna Run. And I kinda started this episode by saying the lyrics of that song that say, "There's 2 things I don't like, change and how things are." And those lyrics are just so powerful and so true, and that song was really the theme of that trip for me because my heart wants to stay, but my feet wanna run. It's like your heart wanted to stay just because it didn't want change, though. Like, I feel like sometimes we're so faced with this, we don't like change, but we don't like how things are. So we're like in this, it feels like a catch-22 where, like, you don't wanna change anything, but you don't like how it is, and you kinda have to figure out which one you're gonna go with. Like, am I gonna continue to not like how things are, or am I going to change? Because those are our only options at this point. And that just, like, really hit me, is that in order for me to have one or the other, like, it's gonna take one or the other. Either I change or I have to not like how things are forever, potentially, which is scary. And I've told you, if you've listened before, that the biggest thing for me was, you know, losing my dad and thinking, if I only have this much more time left in my life, is this how I wanna spend it? And that was honestly, an overwhelming thought to have every day. So, Ernest playing that song, a Jack double in, I just I mean, I definitely not only fell in love with him as an artist, but just, like, that song just hit me so much. And then it was the theme of the rest of the trip, and ironically, what came from that trip was not even just me really knowing that I had to make that decision to change or not like how things are, and that was presented to me, this friendship with Lauren from Dallas that has been great in so many little ways, and I know will continue to be, and it's just crazy. But then Mr. Pennsylvania, if we fast forward, I don't think anyone else could have been from a distance more helpful in my whole early journey of this separation. Since he had recently been through it, we didn't have anything, we didn't do anything romantic, so it was just this friendship. Could he have maybe wanted more? I'm sure, but at the time, like he was just, we would like text, but mostly like Snapchat. Weirdly, like I never really, but not in like a way that people are like, I don't know, people are. It was just like talking to each other, like almost like it was a more convenient FaceTime because you could open as you go, and just like getting through our thoughts and perspectives. And he had such an interesting perspective from the male side and the one that got left that I just needed to hear throughout. And he was just so helpful to me in so many times. I remember like Thanksgiving, my first Thanksgiving that I was alone. And I remember I had like woke up and I was like, okay, I'm going to do some yoga. I'm working out. And after I finished yoga, I just started crying. Like, and it was hard to like connect always, like when you just feel so alone. But I remember just like sending him a snap, like, what? I just worked out and now I'm crying. Like, no, no, no. And he had like went through those similar emotions like recently. And he was just like such an instrumental part of understanding where I was coming from. And I remember like just that went on for a long time of having him to like talk to me about where I was at in my head. And he had even been so kind. So he was like, send me your address. And he sent me this book. He like mailed it to me from Amazon, shipped it from Amazon to my house, sent this cute little note. You got this. It's time to grow. Because I was just struggling. And he sent me Winning the War in Your Mind, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. And it's such a great book. And there's a line in it, or in the beginning, in the introduction, that talks about in 10 years, we will each look in the mirror and someone will stare back. That person will be shaped by the thoughts of today. The life we have is a reflection of what we think. And I feel like there was so much that I needed to learn from this human being that had been through this and had given himself grace and was working to give his partner grace, because obviously he had to co-parent with someone, which was a definitely a different situation with me. And it's crazy to think that that Nashville trip, my very first trip, I sit down in this hotel and I meet this man, and I kid you not, probably no one outside of like one of my best girls in Arizona, who literally dealt with so much of this with me because she had also been divorced too. Probably nobody else listened to more of just my "Ugh, I don't know what I'm doing" thoughts. And I had literally met him one time in person, and we just continuously would Snapchat. Sounds so weird. And never met again. And honestly, it wasn't and honestly, we were still talking right when I about bought my house in Tennessee. He had started dating someone. And so I just knew that was disrespectful for me to like reach out in that regard. And so I think in the early stages, I kind of knew he was dating someone. And as soon as I could tell it was like getting to a good place, he was going to introduce her to the kids. It just out of I think we just mutual respect. I mean, on my part, definitely I knew he would be a respectable partner, but for me, it was like I absolutely didn't wanna disrespect. So it just fizzled. Like, we never had this, like, "Never mind, we're not gonna talk anymore, like, I have a girlfriend." It was never like that. Like, I think we just both it ran its course, and we respectfully just let it be, and I know that he was there just to help me through, to be like a genuine, caring person, but I met you for probably less than 2 hours, and you probably talked me off the ledge in my journey for, a good 10 months. So, yeah, I think when I wonder if Tennessee healed me, I think it brought me so many things that I needed to have in my life to be where I am. That trip brought me experiences that I needed to have and people that I needed to meet in order to get to a place that I could even move to Tennessee. So, yeah, Tennessee kind of healed me. I'll end this by saying that if you're in any position in your life where you're just wanting to know what direction you should be in, obviously, I'm a big trust, your intuition, trust your feelings, but be open to allowing others to be in your life. And because I do believe people are presented to you reason, season, lifetime. And if we don't open ourselves up enough to allow people to be in our lives, we can miss so many great experiences and opportunities that are meant for us. So the next time you're wondering, like, is this like this stranger sat and talked to me? Should I? Unless you're getting like fearful, energy or something like but for the most part, like usually those interactions are there to teach you something or to be there when you need it. It's like I don't know if I could have got through the things that I did without having that dialogue with Mr. Pennsylvania. It was just such a key person. And it's because he was so like-minded in the way that he would give advice but would also be brutally honest with me that it was so necessary in my journey. And I don't know if I could have gotten that from someone that had been closer, like living here or like trying more hard to pursue me like that. Like, I think he definitely maybe saw like, was hopeful in that, but because that couldn't really be given all the circumstances and how unhealed I was and our distance and all the things, like, I think he just ended up being all right with just being there for me, whatever that looked like. And then when I started to heal and he got to a position where he met someone, it was just like it ran its course and it was exactly what it needed to be. And I look back and I'm like, I hope I did something for him. I hope that my perspective maybe made him a better partner to this girlfriend that I'm sure he's a great partner to. It's just so crazy to think about how strangers that knew each other for just hours could impact someone's healing process. So just always leave your doors open. If you know that there's things you still need to learn. And we all always have things we still need to learn. So anyways, I feel like my first trip to Nashville, Tennessee is the reason I could even be here to begin with. If it wouldn't have been that way, if I wouldn't have met the people, if I didn't have those experiences, everything could have been different. And so, yeah, Tennessee kind of did heal me. Thanks for listening to Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan. You matter.